Ministers. James, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Peter.
They inherited a system left on its knees. That's why there are problems with the education system. That's why children with special educational needs can't get the provision they wanted. It's your fault.
Well, every MP will have had the same casework that I have had from parents who are struggling to get support for their children and for additional support in the classroom. We've seen a huge increase in demand for EHCPs and greater support into schools. But what we've now had is the Education Secretary refusing to guarantee EHCPs will continue in the future, but not answered any questions about what might come in their place, which is why we're asking questions here about how parents will be able to be confident their children are going to get the support they need if the government does proceed on this course. It is, of course, a year since the election, and we haven't actually seen any plans yet, and we're told they won't be coming until the autumn. This is a growing area of concern. It's putting a lot of pressure on local authority budgets as well, and having a void and a lot of speculation, a lot of concern being whipped up. It's a bit like we saw with the welfare cuts ahead of the U-turn, when vulnerable people on PIP didn't know whether they were going to be keeping their benefits. So we need some clarity from the government. We need them to answer questions about their plans and whether they want fewer children going to special schools, but then how will they guarantee the mainstream provision is able to accommodate the needs of those children.
There's 638,745 of these particular plans for children, education, health and care plans for children in place in January. That's up 10% on the same point last year. Clearly, there are many more children in need here getting these plans that need this extra provision. What would the Conservatives do if you were in power right now to make sure that these vulnerable children had the correct provision that they needed?
Well, we set out after quite a considerable review process, which took longer than I would have wanted, I think 18 months to 2 years. We set out reforms to the special educational needs system, being clear about what parents could expect to get, what children should be able to get in terms of support, making the process easier and less attritional. It's too much of a battle at the moment, whereas we want to just see children getting the support. And if they can get more support in mainstream education, that's going to be good for the child, the school and the budget. As well as these costs, we also see huge transport costs for local authorities. My own county of Norfolk spends £40 million just moving children around in taxis and other transport to get to their school when they have special needs. So we need to tackle this growth. But you need to do that in a sensible way of reform. And it's regrettable that the Education Secretary just came out at the weekend with these comments without clarifying exactly what she was proposing to do. So we want to see the questions that we've put to the government answered, so there's more clarity for parents and for schools and for local authorities.
Should say the Department for Education says we have been clear that there are no plans to abolish these special educational need tribunals or to remove funding or support from children, families and schools. It would be totally inaccurate to suggest that children, families and schools might experience any loss of funding or support. So are you jumping to conclusions here, James Wilde?
Well, Bridget Phillipson was asked a direct question yesterday and refused to give a direct answer. So it seems that the DfE may have moved that on a little bit yesterday. If she just said yesterday, we're not going to take these away from children who've got them, then everyone would know where they stood. You wouldn't have had front pages warning of revolts from Labour MPs again. Maybe that's what's got them worried and rushed out the statement. But it's not really a good way to govern, particularly when we're talking about vulnerable children and their families who often have to battle a lot to get these plans in place.
I want to talk a little bit about millionaire migration. We know that in 2025 so far the UK will lose the largest number of millionaires due to tax changes and the closure of investor visas. This is going to be about 16,500 millionaires are going to leave. You may not cry too many tears, perhaps our viewers and listeners at home, but actually if you think about how much taxes people are paying, well, look at the United Arab Emirates, for example, where 9,800 millionaires are due to actually go there because of its low taxes, residency programs and high-end lifestyle offerings. And actually, even in terms of millionaires leaving, even less than half of that number is the next one down. That's China. 7,800 are leaving there. I just want to play to James actually what the former Labour leader Neil Kinnock said about a possible wealth tax. This was on Sky News yesterday.
So two things. You think that when Rachel Reeves comes to present her budget in the autumn, number one, she should contemplate tax rises, and secondly, you would say tax rises on wealth and assets?
Yes, I would, because I think they should stick to the fiscal rules they've established as a way of strong reassurance about their commitment. It's very, very, very important, not just for the public, but for the markets too, and indeed for their own self-confidence, which is very important.
So Neil Kinnock there speaking to Trevor Phillips on Sky News, talking about a 2% tax on assets worth more than £10 million that could raise £10 billion a year for the Treasury. James Wilde, with so many taxes going up for so many other people, in fact your government previously left the highest burden of taxation as a proportion of what the country makes since the Second World War. That's gone up even further under Labour. Could a wealth tax be the answer?
Look, I don't think we can afford this government. We can't afford further tax rises. We've already seen, as you say, over 10,000 people leave the country. They pay the equivalent amount of tax as 300,000 average rate taxpayers. That's a huge capital flight. People investing into our economy and into our businesses. And now, because of the U-turns we've had around welfare and on the winter fuel payment, there's a gap in the Chancellor's spending plans, and that's why they're now looking around for more taxes. They talk about wealth tax. They're talking about looking at people's pensions. The Chancellor's refused to rule out extending the freeze in the personal income tax thresholds. So now we're going to have months of speculation just come from the Chamber of the House of Commons, where her deputy was unable to rule out any of these tax measures potentially happening. And that's a result of the bad decisions that they've taken. We should be encouraging wealth creation and wealth generation in this country, not looking to add further taxes on the productive parts of the economy. We already have the top percentage of taxpayers already pay around 50% of the overall income tax, and the top 1% pay around 30%, I think. So we need to be very careful about looking to impose higher taxes on those individuals because they are able to leave the country. We've seen that. The non-doms have become gondoms.
Very good. Going to use that one again. Your fee will be 0p. The EU threatening to derail Starmer's Channel migrant deal. What do you make of this idea in regard to the one-in, one-out policy and what the EU is saying about it, especially with Macron being here this week?
Well, it's a little bit hard to understand what the Prime Minister is trying to achieve. It sounds like he's willing to pay the French a lot of money and then have a merry-go-round of illegal boats and then returning other people. We want the French to stop the boats leaving their shores. We have seen in the last week or so them using knives and piercing these boats to stop them actually leaving. They need to ramp up that activity hugely, stop people leaving in the first place. Then we wouldn't be in a position where the Prime Minister is looking at an agreement where we accept these people and then we take other people in their stead. I'm not sure how that's going to drive down the numbers who are arriving. The only way to do that is to stop the boats from leaving the French shores or having a very clear deterrent. If you come here illegally, you'll be detained and then swiftly removed. And those were the plans we had before the election. We didn't get them up and running. People voted against us in large part because we'd failed to deliver on that scheme. But the first thing the government did was to scrap that deterrent. And we've now seen 20,000 arrivals this year already, a record amount, and 42,000 since the election. So smashing the gangs has proved to be nothing than a slogan, and people are getting incredibly frustrated and angry with this. And they want to see a proper deal with the French, something that stops the boats, not where we pay them and then we take people who've arrived instead of the people who've arrived illegally.
James Wilde, thank you. That's James Wilde, who is the Shadow Exchequer Secretary of the Treasury. He's the Conservative MP for North West Norfolk.